We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
But what about the right to be unhappy, or the right to be happy in an unusual way? Are you happy?
The right the Declaration of Independence was concerned about was the pursuit of happiness. That was when happiness was an art. Now, it is a science. We have pursued it long enough. It's time we caught up with it.
Is happiness the goal? The goal. In science fiction writer Ursula Le Guin's story, The People Who Walked Away from Omelas, there exists a community called Omelas where the people are happy.
They were not naive and happy children, though their children were, in fact, happy. They were mature, intelligent, passionate adults whose lives were not wretched.
But the happiness of the people of Omelas depends on the unhappiness of one child. This is the dark secret which sustains their happy community.
The child used to scream for help at night and cry a good deal, but now it only makes a kind of whining, and it speaks less and less often. It is so thin that there are no calves to its legs. Its belly protrudes. It lives on a half bowl of cornmeal and grease a day. It is naked. They all know it is there, all the people of Omelas. They understand that their happiness, the beauty of their city, the tenderness of their friendships, the health of their children, the wisdom of their scholars, the skill of their makers, even the abundance of their harvest and the kindly weathers of their skies, depend wholly on this child's abominable misery.
Sometimes the happiness of the majority depends on the unhappiness of a few, and other times the unhappiness of the many provide for the happiness of a select few. Now, if you're anything like me, finding out about the Omelas does not make you happy. It makes you fucking miserable.
Yo, I'm bummed AF.
Why are you talking like that?
Fuck, I forgot to take my joy today. That's better. Let's talk about happy things, shall we?
To be happy is necessarily the wish of every finite rational being, and this, therefore, is inevitably a determining principle of its faculty of desire. Unfortunately, the notion of happiness is so indeterminate that although every human being wishes to attain it, yet he can never say definitely and consistently what it is that he really wishes and wills.
Everyone knows that there are good things and bad things in the world. Things that make you happy and things that make you sad. Sara Ahmed, in The Promise of Happiness, writes that there are objects we assign happiness to. Objects which, through our proximity to them, give us happiness. This happiness may only exist upon a future gaining of the object. It may rest on a future idea. I will be happy when I get the food, but then when you get the food, the happiness may go away.
If we arrive at objects with an expectation of how we'll be affected by them, this affects how they affect us, even in the moment they fail to live up to their expectations. Happiness provides the emotional setting for disappointment.
Sometimes we attach our happiness to the wrong objects. After all, everyone knows that in order to have good taste, one must become happy through the right objects. Those who become happy through elevated, expensive foods, clothing, perfumes, and high culture, they deserve happiness. And as Ahmed points out, they will often gain happiness through the social association that these objects have to happiness.
The literalism of affect slides into the literalism of the moral economy. We assume something feels good because it is good. We are good if it feels good. In other words, when we are affected in a good way by what is attributed as being good, we become the good ones, the virtuous and happy ones.
So if we say, for example, that in order to have a good taste, you must like these films and this type of music, these sorts of cuisine and these luxury brands, then you will come to associate happiness with those objects. What do you mean you've never seen 2004's Barbie as the Princess and the Pauper? Don't you have good taste? We might feel that if we could just appreciate the things that everyone with good taste does, then we too will have good taste, and therefore we too will possess the happiness tied to these objects. Of course, it's not just objects which can contain happiness and therefore give us happiness. There are also good and bad paths in this world, and following the good paths will result in happiness, and following the bad paths will result in unhappiness.
It is known. It is known.
For example, I was told growing up that the path to happiness for me was promised on the condition that I was gender normative, married, had kids, obeyed the law, obeyed God, spread the Christian faith to non-believers, and became educated and got a high salary. My happiness path was given to me from a very young age. And not only was this the path to happiness, but it was also mandatory. You don't get to leave the path. But don't worry, because the path will make you happy. Now, I suppose in telling you what will make you happy, I must also inform you of unhappiness causes. We don't question why we give all our money away to our bosses and work for almost nothing just to survive. Obviously, that question is going to make you unhappy. It's an unhappiness cause, and if you start to become unhappy, you might make me unhappy. And that would really bum me out.
Yo, I'm bummed AF.
It's important in a community that we are all happy. If one of us starts to become unhappy, they become an unhappiness cause for all of us. If you stray from the good path, if you question your working conditions, if you start wearing the wrong sorts of clothes and looking strange, these things will make you unhappy. Of course, you're a free person. You're allowed to dress how you want, love who you want, express yourself freely, and if you want to be unhoused and unemployed, that's your choice. You can choose to stop taking your joy. You can start to care about social issues and so-called injustices in the world. But that's just going to make you unhappy, and therefore me unhappy, and I just want you to be happy. Sorry about that. As Sara Ahmed explains, good and bad feelings are affective. If you're negative and sad around me, that might make me sad. Likewise, if you're happy, joyous, and exuberant, those feelings may pass on to me. So it's ideal if we find happiness from the same objects. Happiness in shared objects creates community. Unfortunately, not everyone takes their joy, but I'm sure you're not everyone. And if you start feeling a little bit down, just remember to... We Happy Few is a video game released in 2018 that explores an alternate history post-war England. In We Happy Few, the British surrendered to the Germans in World War II, and you, as one of several playable characters, explore the dystopia that ensued. This world revolves around joy, a drug that the entire British population are forced to take if they want to remain in society. The very simple effect of this drug is that it makes you happy. It causes you to interpret the grim reality of your surroundings as actually joyous, colorful, and euphoric. So if your house is actually a decrepit ruin, you might instead interpret it as brightly colored and beautiful. In the opening sequence of the game, you think you're having a fun piñata party, but you're actually beating the corpses of dead rats. Joy also wrecks your memory. Nobody remembers their personal traumas or the dark past of their society.
I was so sad. So sad. Must have been a hard time. I can't remember now.
This makes it the ultimate propaganda tool. Nobody remembers the war and all its horrors. Nobody remembers that we had to send off all our children to Germany because the Germans had tanks.
Good thing I can't remember. This is better. Better. Isn't it better?
Except they weren't tanks.
Is this dog real?
They were fake papier-mâché tanks. We sent off all of our children to the Germans because of paper-fucking-mâché.
No, don't tell me. It's not important.
Joy, the new sadness intervention from Hayworth Lab.
This is a post-trauma society. Well, at least temporarily, because when you stop taking joy, the memories start to slowly tumble back in. You remember that not only did Germany not even have any real tanks, but it was actually us, the citizens of Wellington Wells, who helped supply the paper to make the fake tanks. And when we found out about it, instead of rising up in rebellion or doing literally anything about it, we lied. We said that we won the war, and we created joy so that nobody would remember the truth. After all, in the words of one of the playable characters, Victoria Bing, truth is the enemy of happiness. And it's ever so important that we remain happy. That's why we all wear masks with permanent smiles etched into our faces.
You should get one. They shape your face into a smile, and when you smile, you can't help being happy.
In We Happy Few, you begin the story working your good, honest job as a professional in censorship, or I should say journalism. It's your job to erase the parts of the news that makes people sad. Your joy is sat there on your desk, and you have a choice to make. You can continue taking it, maintain your happiness, live out your good, honest job censoring the papers, keeping calm and carrying on. Or you can skip your dose. And if you choose the latter, well, people won't be all too happy about it. After all, in Wellington Wells, taking joy is mandatory. Unhappiness is not allowed. If you want to participate in proper society, you will take your joy. The game literalizes a hierarchy of happiness and class. If you don't take your joy, or if you're unlucky and the drug simply doesn't work on you, you are cast out of society. You are called a downer.
Unhappiness becomes a right in a world that makes happiness compulsory. The freedom to be happy restricts human freedom if you are not free to not be happy.
The downers live in tragic, chaotic settlements outside society, where they eke out a bleak existence. Many of them suffer from recurrent traumas and health issues brought on from extensive or unsuccessful joy usage. Not to mention, they bear the burden of the memories of what happened. They do not get the privilege of forgetting, of having their misery remain underground. If you want to traverse class, if you're tired of being a downer and you want to be included in the prosperous happy folk, you have to go through what's referred to as decontamination. Unhappiness is viewed as contamination. The downers are the unhappy, but they are also the dirty and filthy. They're poor, but most importantly, they're miserable.
The very idea of contagion can be evoked in the self-regulation of feeling worlds. You might refuse proximity to somebody out of fear that you'll be infected by unhappiness, or you might seek proximity to somebody out of hope that you'll be infected by happiness. An effective geography of happiness takes shape.
At one point in the game, in order to get back into the good, moral, upstanding, wealthy, happy society, you have to go through decontamination to enter Hamlin Village. Decontamination first involves showering, cleaning yourself. Then you must dress yourself in proper clothes befitting the happy few. Afterwards, you must watch a propaganda video on how you should behave in proper society. Next, you must pass an intentionally broken game show to prove you understand what's required, that you must not speak of the eyes which are everywhere, which are watching. And of course, as the final step to reintegration, the final test which causes you to be physically obliterated should you not comply, is to take your joy. It's as simple as popping a pill, and it's strawberry flavored. What more could you want? And once you take it, you'll see that happiness is a choice. I don't understand people who aren't happy. Like, if you want to be happy, just think happy thoughts. It's literally that simple. If you say you're happy, then you are. If you're bummed out, you probably haven't ever thought about this, but you can literally just go for a run. It works for me. I'm so fucking happy. According to the inventor of holistic psychology, Nicole LePera, a wealthy white cisgender woman in a polyamorous throuple with two other so-called self-healers,
we all have the privilege of choosing our mindset.
When it was argued to her that actually not everybody does have such a privilege, and that many factors like economic and minority status impact mental health, she doubled down.
I listened to many mentors in this arena who are of different races and grew up in poverty talking about how this very idea changed their lives. My deepest belief is that we are 100% responsible for our thoughts, behaviors, and reactions. This is empowerment, regardless of where you came from.
LePera's work falls under the umbrella of what's referred to as positive psychology.
Positive psychology as a field is predicated on this promise. If you say, I am happy, or make other positive self-declarations, then you will become happy. Positive psychology aims to understand positive happiness by providing explanations of its causes, as well as to use this knowledge about happiness to create happiness. Positive psychology aims to make people happier. Positive psychology is positive about positive feeling. It presumes the promissory nature of its own object.
LePera's prerogative is that we all have the power to self-heal. Her recommendation is that you do not go to therapy, do not seek mental health diagnoses, and don't believe any diagnoses you've already been given. You don't need these things when you can just self-heal for the small price of $26 a month by joining her self-healer circle, which you can join from anywhere in the world and self-heal yourself by being told what to do to self-heal on your own with a group of people. I read, I will admit, as much as I felt able to, of Nicole's book, How to Do the Work. One of the first things this book tells you is that you can control your thoughts. But I have a disability called OCD, which quite literally means that I cannot control my thoughts. Like, that's the whole disability. I did a lot of work back when I was a Christian to try to cure my disorder on my own. I truly did believe that I could control my thoughts and make my disability go away. And that was even before I knew what it was called. But when I got diagnosed with OCD, decades of suffering suddenly came into perspective for me. I realized that I had a neurodivergence, which was a disability that I could certainly work to improve, but which also ultimately was not my fault. And it wasn't something that I could just magic away with positive thinking. I've done extensive therapy, I've done CBT, I've tried praying my OCD away, and you can definitely believe I've tried to self-heal. I would say that my OCD is honestly in a pretty healthy place right now, thanks to the work that I've put in. But I still have it. It's a neurodivergence that still informs my life. It's still a disability, and it still makes some aspects of my life really, really difficult. Most principally the fact that I cannot control my thoughts. I'm not bringing up Nicole to bash her practice or to discourage you from attempting alternative forms of mental health therapy and trauma healing. I have a lot of issues with traditional psychology myself, and I would broadly agree with the position that we live in an era of overdiagnosis and overprescription. But I also think that it's positively insane to suggest that we are solely responsible for our own mental and physical well-being, particularly in a society that is literally designed to make us unwell. Just last year, a study was published ranking the UK as having the second to worst measure of mental health out of 71 countries. And that alongside South Africa, we have the highest proportion of people in mental distress. It's not hard to imagine a world where the British population are all on happy drugs, ignoring the grim realities of a cost of living crisis and a housing crisis, while merrily building more empty apartment buildings and making sure that you're all too worried about trans women peeing to think about the real issues. British journalist George Monbiot wrote about the Global Mind Project survey, saying that the issue with Britain's mental wellness crisis is neoliberalism.
Neoliberalism is an ideology that sees competition as our defining feature. It insists that our well-being is best realized not through political choice, but through economic choice. If we keep working harder, one day we'll pay for the public services we need. One day we'll earn the economic security we crave. One day we'll have more leisure time. Will this magic day ever arrive? Of course not. Strong public services and economic security were never part of the plan. But to have us working ever longer hours on behalf of capital? That is very much part of the plan. In these and other ways, governance in the UK feels like one long trick played on the public.
Happiness and wellness aren't important to capitalism unless they are able to increase your productivity or, of course, motivate you to make purchases.
We're effectively forced to constantly use our productive forces and debilitate our bodies and minds in the service of capitalists just to earn enough to survive. In this context, good health becomes ever harder to maintain, even with the many benefits that capitalism brings.
Capitalism wants you to believe in exactly the sort of individualistic thinking that Nicole LePera espouses. Your happiness and your mental well-being are your own responsibility. You have to heal yourself by buying her program. And if you're feeling down about your lot in life, well, just change your perspective. You don't even need to take joy. You can just convince your brain that it's already on joy. Neoliberal society also wants us to associate happiness with work, to find joy in labor. And if we work hard enough, happiness will come. The carrot on the stick.
The best moments in our lives are not the passive, receptive, relaxing times, although such experiences can also be enjoyable if we have worked hard to attain them. The best moments usually occur when a person's body or mind is stretched to its limits in a voluntary effort to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. In the long run, optimal experiences add up to a sense of mastery, or perhaps better, a sense of participation in determining the content of life that comes as close to what is usually meant by happiness as anything else we can conceivably imagine.
Imagine labor, which we literally sell to survive, being the best moments of your whole life. I want to take this guy to a sex club. Anyway, I love hard work as much as the last Grindmax career core corporate ladder slut, but I definitely don't dream of labor, nor does it constitute the best parts of my entire life. The labor that does bring me the most joy and fulfillment are these videos, creative work, not labor that is sold for survival, as much as I wish I could survive off these videos. But of course, there's reasons one might want you to only experience or predominantly associate happiness from labor, and that's those to whom you labor for. Happiness is desirable. If we are happy when we work, then we want to work because we want to be seen as happy. Happiness is how we prove that we are successful, especially since happiness is the goal.
Happy persons are more likely to be found in the economically prosperous countries, whose freedom and democracy are held in respect, and the political scene is stable. The happy are more likely to be found in majority groups than among minorities, and more often at the top of the ladder than at the bottom. They are typically married and get on well with families and friends. In respect of their personal characteristics, the happy appear relatively healthy, both physically and mentally. They are active and open-minded. They feel they are in control of their lives. Their aspirations concern social and moral matters rather than money-making. In matters of politics, the happy tend to the conservative side of the middle.
Money can't buy happiness. Can't it? Part of the mission of capitalism is literally to make happiness purchasable, or at least to make it feel that way. That way, there's no impetus to challenge the existing system.
If the individuals are satisfied to the point of happiness with the goods and services handed down to them by the administration, why should they insist on different institutions for a different production of different goods and services? And if the individuals are preconditioned so that the satisfying goods also include thoughts, feelings, aspirations, why should they wish to think, feel, and imagine for themselves?
As we can see, the happy are the economically successful, and economic success requires work. So if you work hard enough and you gain economic prosperity, you climb the ladder to the top. Then you'll be happy. Of course, that's the theory. In practice, working longer hours than peasants did under feudalism
leads to a situation where we all become sick or disabled, or at the very least, where well-being is elusive for most of us.
There is so much pressure in our world, not only to be productive, not only to be made happy by the right objects, to follow the correct happiness path, but also to appear this way. We see this on social media where one can perfectly curate and perform how happy, healthy, and productive they are. And this is easy to do when happiness already is totally undefined and relies entirely on self-reporting. People will often claim to be happy in order to prove that they are on the good path, that they're successful, or to alleviate concerns amongst their loved ones, potentially just to avoid attention. I actually really need to do yoga because filming this, I am so uncomfortable. Oh my goodness. As some of the philosophers quoted in The Promise of Happiness would have you believe, happiness is a trait. Quality people just are happy. So wouldn't you want to see yourself in that demographic? Not to mention the ways in which unhappy people are described. Misery, poor, unwellness, discontent, not having. The ways in which we articulate unhappiness are often wrapped up in ways of describing poverty or otherness. Just world fallacy may lead you to believe that you are happy, not because you're one of the lucky individuals for whom the good path was literally created, and not because you're one of the ones who has, while others have not, but because of some sort of inherent aspect of who you are. You're just one of the happy ones. Other people are just unhappy. That's who they are. And if this is just part of the way that things are, if it's just part of common sense and the world that we inhabit, then it's not something in need of changing. This pressure to appear happy is itself often overwhelming and exhausting, especially when you have to be totally reliable for your own happiness and well-being in a society where
many workers today perform cognitive, attentive, and emotional labor more than the manual labor of Marx's time, while our requirements as consumers and citizens to have the correct desires have also been restricted.
Some groups, of course, labor more than others. Happiness as disguised pro-labor propaganda is perhaps most prominently experienced by women.
The happy housewife is a fantasy figure that erases the signs of labor under the sign of happiness. The claim that women are happy and that this happiness is behind the work they do functions to justify gendered forms of labor, not as a product of nature, law, or duty, but as an expression of a collective wish and desire. How better to justify an unequal distribution of labor than to say that such labor makes people happy?
You don't have to feel bad about us doing all of your physical and emotional labor. It makes us happy, and I wouldn't dream of suggesting otherwise. After all, I wouldn't want to be one of those. Sara Ahmed focuses a lot on the figure of what she calls the feminist killjoy. She writes that
feminists might kill joy simply by not finding the objects that promise happiness to be quite so promising. However she speaks, the feminist is usually the one viewed as causing the argument, who is disturbing the fragility of peace.
The fragility of peace, of course, is a peace created by and in favor of men. To disrupt the peace is to create unhappiness. Dating all the way back to the suffragette movement, happiness has been weaponized and deployed to target, mock, and belittle everything to do with womanhood and feminist movements.
There is a desire to believe that women become feminists because they're unhappy, perhaps as a displacement of their envy for those who have achieved the happiness they've failed to achieve.
Oh, you're not happy on the good path? Skill issue. The path is fine. It's your fault you couldn't be happy on it. It would be better for everyone if you just grin and bear it.
If an oppressed person does not smile or show signs of being happy, then he or she is read as being negative, as angry, hostile, unhappy, and so on. Happiness becomes the expected default position for those who are oppressed, such that it comes to define the sphere of neutrality.
Indeed, situations of conflict, violence, and power are read as about the unhappiness of feminists rather than being what feminists are unhappy about. Of course, feminism itself is a space that might request a performance of happiness from its own members. While wider society expects women to be happy about our place within society, feminist circles often require that the minorities within, Black women, trans women, also mask their unhappiness. The presence of women of color and trans women in feminist circles creates unease. The white and cisgender feminists can no longer relax in celebration of their shared cause and shared identities. They are now afraid of cancellation, afraid of wokeism, afraid of offending.
The figure of the angry Black woman is also a fantasy figure that produces its own effects. Reasonable, thoughtful arguments are dismissed as anger, which makes you angry, such that your response becomes read as a confirmation of evidence that you are not only angry, but also unreasonable. The exposure of violence becomes the origin of violence.
It's no secret that the anger of so-called TRAs, or trans radical activists, was the key motivating factor in J.K. Rowling becoming more radicalized in her hatred of trans women. Angry wokeism is quoted as the motivator for many incredibly vocal yet somehow simultaneously canceled right-wing personalities. They literally attribute their alt-right beliefs to being sparked by leftist anger. This grand cultural scale tone policing operates where the expression of any kind of hurt, trauma, pain, anger, frustration can be bundled up and described as woke, and then turned into justification for online hatred, political policies, and the encouraging of hate crimes and prejudice. And you can just say, but look, they expressed anger first, as your neat little excuse for what was probably an existing prejudice against an oppressed community. Woke simultaneously carries no meaning and all of the meaning. It describes an aesthetic, a lack of aesthetic, the mere existence of people of color and trans people. I am being woke on the tube by just leaving my house. Wokeism could be pointing out that your boss is being sexually inappropriate, or that actually it's illegal for your landlord to evict you for that reason. Wokeism can be merely stating the law, pointing out simple truths, holding people accountable. Wokeism can be community care. You can be woke for wanting good medical care and to have a nice walk through your local park. Wokeism can also be the denial of joy for those whose joy is predicated on objectification. We are woke for wanting diverse bodies and representation in video games. But really, what woke means is that men want to see anime pornified bodies in every single piece of media they consume. And yet, when we try to wokeify Gerald, suddenly, that's not what I meant. Their happiness, their joy, their pleasure are what is being taken away through challenging objectification and introducing bodily and artistic diversity. Wokeism could be seen as a denial of a particularly selfish happiness, as if the happiness of those of us who are suddenly seeing ourselves in media and having our oppression made aware is less important, or a result of some sort of invented victimhood. Wokeism, including racism, transphobia, ableism, etc., becomes the excuse for the right wing to dismiss the very real struggles of very real oppressed groups. The lie that we are told is that if we were just happy with existing conditions and cultural norms, then we would be allowed to have a reasonable conversation about changes we want made, and that we would be protected from political and physical harm. It doesn't matter that it is almost impossible to be happy in a culture that does not accept you or accommodate for your medical and legal needs. The happiness of the majority is what matters. What matters is that the omelas remain content. And yes, I only just realized the correct pronunciation on today's filming day. #growth. Let me live. Unhappiness, to Ahmed, is a way in which we as women resist.
Feminism involves challenging the very pressure of happiness, the way it restricts the possibilities for finding excitement. Feminism, by refusing to go along with public displays of happiness, can participate in the widening of horizons in which it's possible to find things.
The widening of horizons, however, carries its own difficulties.
Opening up the world or expanding one's horizons can thus mean becoming more conscious of just how much there is to be unhappy about. To become conscious of possibility can involve mourning for its loss.
So let's talk about possibility. When you grow up as a woman in the world or as a queer child, you become familiar very quickly with limited possibility.
How, in the feminine condition, can a human being accomplish herself? What paths are open to her? Which ones lead to dead ends? These are the fundamental questions we would like to elucidate. This means that in focusing on the individual's possibilities, we will define these possibilities not in terms of happiness, but in terms of freedom.
From a very, very young age, you learn that you must follow strict codes of laws in regards to your gender expression and performance. You learn that there are places you cannot go. There are certain ways you cannot be.
Happiness is used as a technology or instrument, creating scripts for how to live well. We can think of gendered scripts as happiness scripts, whereby happiness is what follows being natural or good.
You are often presented with these scripts from your parents, and it's made clear to you that your parents would be unhappy if you strayed from these scripts. Therefore, you become responsible for the happiness of your parents. As Sara Ahmed discusses, many parents operate with conditional happiness. Their happiness is conditional on yours. In principle, you want your parents to care about your happiness, but it also puts a lot of pressure on you to be happy for them. If their happiness relies on you, then you make your parents unhappy by not being happy. There is double unhappiness. Ahmed also writes that parents may operate under a survival logic of deferral, more or less connecting children with a vague concept of immortality. Since we are all going to die, we can live on through our children, and thus our happiness lives on through them, and then their children's happiness. Happiness lives through reproduction, and a reproduction that follows good paths.
The child thus has a happiness duty. A duty can function as a debt. The obligation of the child is to be happy is repaying of what the child owes, of what is due to the parents given what they have given up. The duty of the child is to make the parents happy and to perform this duty happily by being happy or by showing signs of being happy in the right way.
Being happy in the right way is crucial here. You must follow the correct scripts for happiness in order for happiness to live on. If you're a woman, that means that you must make a man happy. According to famous Meninist and manosphere icon Rousseau, your only purpose as a woman is to
be pleasing in a man's sight, to win his respect and love, to train him in childhood, to tend him in manhood, to counsel and console, to make his life pleasant and happy. Imagine a virtuous and charming wife adorned with such accomplishments and devoting them to her husband's amusement. Will she not add to his happiness?
So, according to Rousseau, it is the man's happiness that is created by women. It is the man's happiness which matters. And you making a man happy is what then creates happiness for your parents. They can say, well, our daughter followed the good path and created happiness for her husband, which we can now be happy about. The men's loneliness epidemic seems apt to bring up here. Loneliness is also unhappiness. These men see their happiness as a product that progressive leftist society is no longer producing for them. Women are becoming increasingly happy on our own without needing men. But men still need women to be happy. Thus, they view us as having maliciously stolen their happiness from them, which is true. As Ahmed writes, when happiness fails in its promise, you might experience rage directed against the object that fails to deliver its promise. Or it might spill out towards those who promised you happiness through the elevation of some things as good. Incels are the perfect example of this. They are promised by right-wing meninists like Andrew Tate that they can accrue femoids as a happiness resource, that they are entitled to sex, that they deserve female companionship, and that they can just go out there and get it. All they have to do is
be as successful as possible in all realms. You have to be as good looking, as funny, as smart, as spontaneous, as interesting, as charismatic, as rich as possible.
We might see the good path as a path designed and created by men. So to not walk the good path may be to deny men happiness, and also crucially to say that happiness is not owed by any one group to any other. And for many of us, happiness was never even possible in a conditional for other people way. Some of us don't even get a good path designed for us.
Happiness becomes what follows nature's path. Deviations from nature become deviations from the common good. We can describe happiness quite simply as a convention, such that to deviate from paths of happiness is to challenge convention.
If you are queer, you are deviating from nature's path, never mind that nature itself is filled with queerness. Ahmed highlights the way that queer media often creates a distinction between happy endings for heterosexual characters and unhappy endings for queer characters, something that was necessary throughout the 1900s as the price to pay to have queer characters on screen at all. They were allowed, but only if they didn't get a happy ending.
The very distinction between happy and unhappy endings works to secure a moral distinction between good and bad lives. We must resist this literalism, which means an active disbelief in the necessary alignment of the happy with the good.
This creates a culture where even if family members are accepting of their queer children theoretically, they might still be upset feeling that their child is now denied a happy ending.
In some parental responses to the child coming out, this unhappiness is not so much expressed as being unhappy about the child being queer, but as being unhappy about the child being unhappy.
What this means is that the judgment of unhappiness creates unhappiness in the very performance of the failure to recognize the social viability of queer relationships. If we created a world that celebrated queer lives, we could create queerness as a happiness object, as one of many possible paths towards happiness, instead of as a good path deviation. Instead, we live in a world where it can be very difficult to differentiate between whether you are sad because the world has deemed your very existence to be an unhappiness cause, or whether your unhappiness has anything genuine to it.
In this little room tonight, every night, there is so much misery, so much despair, that the walls seem almost too narrow to contain it. Yet outside, there are happy people who sleep the sleep of the so-called just and righteous. When they wake, it will be to persecute those, through no fault of their own, have been set apart from the day of their birth, deprived of all sympathy, all understanding. They are thoughtless, these happy people who sleep.
While discussing the well of loneliness, Ahmed says that the happy folk, those who sleep, those who do not think to think, depend on misery being kept underground. And so, in this same logic, by bringing misery to the surface, by being miserable, by sharing, exposing, and lamenting about misery, we challenge those who sleep.
Looking on the bright side of things is a euphemism used for obscuring certain realities of life, the open consideration of which might prove threatening or dangerous to the status quo.
Oh my lord. He's a downer. Call security. We've got a downer.
Take your joy. Take your joy.
There is something false about our consciousness of the world. We learn not to be conscious, not to see what happens right in front of us. Happiness provides, as it were, a cover. Becoming conscious, refusing to take cover, is a form of political struggle.
And it's another fabulous day in Wellington Wells. The sun is up, and the weather is overcast and only slightly rainy, with occasional patches of lovely sunshine. Wakey, wakey, everyone.
Ahmed repeatedly highlights in The Promise of Happiness that recognizing injustices in the world is an unhappiness cause. There is mourning which comes from recognizing injustice. She also points out the ways that happiness is used to gloss over empire, to conceal the crimes of the nation state, and crucially, to generate positive feelings about the nation state. I think We Happy Few exemplifies this perfectly.
And welcome to today's edition of Great English Victories, the show where the English win in the end. No such thing exists as a joy spiral. I mean, you might as well believe in the Tooth Fairy or Santa Claus or those people who tell you that we lost the war. It's ridiculous.
Because joy causes you to forget the crimes of British society, the image of the British Empire remains perpetually joyful. It is immune to criticism because criticism cannot be remembered.
Rule Britannia, Britannia rules the waves. Britons never, never, never shall be slaves.
We'll just make everyone else our slaves. As an immigrant here, I've had a particularly complicated relationship with British nationalism. I was once advised to take down social media posts I had made about how hard my life as an immigrant has been, to be quiet and minimize my suffering if I wanted to continue to be granted visas. I moved to the UK when I was still a minor. I had almost no money and hyper-conservative, queer-phobic family back home. The choice for me was between extortionate, often very unfair visa fees and rules, or going back to a country where I had no hope of feeling safe or accepted. The fact that I was only second-generation American and had British family didn't matter. The fact that this was the only country I had known as an adult did not matter. I spent 10 years of my life falling to my knees, begging the UK government to let me stay, and begging those around me for money so that I could afford these often dehumanizing compromises with the Home Office.
The happiness duty for migrants means telling a certain story about your arrival as good, or the good of your arrival. The happiness duty is a positive duty to speak of what is good, but can also be thought as a negative duty not to speak of what is not good, not to speak from or out of unhappiness.
Now, as the final step towards a permanent settlement, I've had to take the Life in the UK test. Which of the following is a fundamental principle of British life? A, actively supporting your local football team. B, participation in community life. C, ignoring your neighbors. Or D,
oh God, the eyes.
And you'll never guess the answer to, was the British Empire a force for good in the world? A bit subjective, don't you think? As Ahmed writes, the British nation has been rather good at defending itself against shame. You can see this in silly multiple choice questions. You can see it in the statues to supposed liberators and the obsessions with the royal family. Yes, the king loves you specifically. God save the king. As an American living in the UK, I've always found middle-class England to be eerily, performatively joyful. People don't like to talk about hard things. They like to keep calm and carry on, have a good, proper cup of tea, engage in polite chit-chat, but never face the grim realities around them, or the realities abroad which the governments they themselves have voted for have inflicted upon most of the known world.
The child who wants to be British becomes the adult who knows the promise is empty.
I have spent my entire adult life trying to become British on purpose. Someone pass me the fucking joy. Hey guys, it's sunny out now. Because of fucking course it is. She said, you know what? I finally got my permanent residency. Let me just go home anyway. Let me just deport myself. The British Project has done a really good job of marketing itself and deflecting shame. We Happy Few literalizes the way that happiness can function as cover, as concealing history, as causing forgetfulness.
Ollie, the safest secret in the world is a secret no one wants to hear.
You can certainly see forgetfulness as a tool of empire in the ways that the USA and the UK will often gloss over horrible events in their histories, celebrate people who committed war crimes, all while reassuring you that the bad, dark themes are just themes in the past. That's history. Don't focus on all that negativity in the past. Focus on the present. And the present wants you to be happy about your nation, to take pride in your nation.
Happiness can thus involve a project of social description. To see happily is not to see violence, asymmetry, or force. When we are asked to recall the empire as a happy history, we are employing the same terms in which empire was justified in history. To employ happy terms does not mean, of course, that happy feelings are simply generated.
Happiness can be employed to justify imperial domination and expansion. Ahmed points out how various countries that the UK colonized were colonized under the pretense that the natives were an unhappy people. They could not be happy because they did not possess the correct desires, according to white British nationalism.
They would like by all means to convince themselves that striving after English happiness, I mean after comfort and fashion, is at the same time the true path of virtue.
Happiness is propagandized as a gift to the colonized people.
The civilizing mission can be redescribed as a happiness mission. For happiness to become a mission, the colonized other must first be deemed unhappy. This gift of happiness is imagined here in terms of civility. Human happiness is increased through the course, law, justice, knowledge, reason, and manners, culture, habits.
We can see happiness evoked in Trump's description of how great a Trump Gaza would be. In his insane AI video on the topic, the lyrics of the song say, "Donald Trump has come to set you free, bringing the light for all to see," with artificially generated happy dancing Palestinians. They had to artificially generate the happy Palestinians because the real ones are being genocided. If you are bold enough to literally risk arrest and say something so controversial that maybe killing babies is not super great, you might get an edgy internet commentator telling you about how miserable you would be living in Gaza. If you're a queer person, you're told that Israel is the land of happiness for queer people, and that by them genociding Palestinians, they are bringing happiness to the uncivilized. They are creating freedom and happiness for queer people via bombs. I'm sorry, I'm bringing the mood down. I wouldn't want anyone to be feeling doom or misery. Watching Israel murder tens of thousands of women and children in Palestine isn't fun. It doesn't feel good. It doesn't make me happy talking about Palestine and seeing war crimes unfolding on my fucking For You page. And unless you're a sociopath wanted for war crimes with an arrest warrant out for you by the ICC, it shouldn't make you happy either. But that's just it, isn't it? Doom, misery, sadness, these are inaction generators. The ideas in ContraPoint's post here is that the whole thing is too depressing to really act on, that the genocide had some sort of inevitability, and in many ways, it feels like she's suggesting it still does.
The belief that things will only get better at some point, that is always just over the horizon, can be a way of avoiding the impact of suffering in the world that exists before us. But we can also interrogate disbelief in the possibility of a different world as a psychic defense against suffering. Pessimism can offer a way of inhabiting the world through shielding oneself from possibility.
And I get that it's incredibly hard not to feel defeated and depressed watching a literal genocide unfold in front of your face, especially when you're powerless to do something about it. I guess I just feel like that shouldn't stop us from caring. It shouldn't stop us from fighting, stop us from shouting, even if it's one shout amongst millions, even if these shouts don't reach ears in power. More than anything, I wish we cared about Palestinian happiness as much as we cared about the happiness of white middle-class Americans and Brits and the politicians they vote for. I wish Palestinian happiness mattered as much as Israeli happiness, and that Israel did not have the power to take so many others' happiness and hope and futures away.
We have a political economy of hope, where hope itself is unevenly distributed, where some not only have more hope than others, but acquire their hope by taking hope away from others, which is at the same time about making others be in order that some can have what they hoped for.
But what matters is that the Omalas stay happy.
The child used to scream for help at night and cry a good deal. It is so thin that there are no calves to its legs. Its belly protrudes. It lives on a half bowl of cornmeal and grease a day. It is naked. They all know it is there. all the people of Omelas. They understand that their happiness, the beauty of their city, the tenderness of their friendships, the health of their children, the wisdom of their scholars, the skill of their makers, even the abundance of their harvest and the kindly weathers of their skies, depend wholly on this child's abominable misery.
I'm curious to see how things develop now that the mainstream media, who have been in hardcore denial of this genocide since the very beginning, are starting to finally admit what we have all seen right before our eyes for years now. It may be harder to hide from shame with happy thoughts if you are one of the ones so deep in denial. Maybe it will be easier to just pretend that you always knew it was a genocide, and of course you spoke out about it. Of course you did. Talking about injustice sucks. It's not fun, it's not happy, it's genuinely grim having to acknowledge the cruelties of our world, the ways in which there is so much suffering, which we as humans are perpetuating against other humans and against the planet. But in acknowledging this injustice, in talking about unhappy things, in highlighting suffering, we are then able to do something about it.
To recognize the causes of unhappiness is thus a part of our political cause. This is why any politics of justice will involve causing unhappiness, even if that's not the point of our action. So much happiness is premised on and promised by the concealment of suffering, the freedom to look away from what compromises one's happiness.
I recently saw this Instagram reel.
People who are on the left are sadder than people who are on the right. This is an ongoing sociological finding in almost every country on earth. Left-wing people are more sad than right-wing people. And there are a lot of reasons for this, because also left-wing people do all the things that make you sad. They read the news more, they get divorced more, they're in church less, which actually can be complicated, but sometimes makes you more sad, depends on the church. They do a lot of things that are correlated for sociology with being more sad. And also they're just unhappy with the state of the world, right?
I think this makes a lot of sense. If recognizing suffering involves mourning and the left is the side of empathy and therefore recognition of suffering, then you can see how recognition of unhappiness might make you unhappy. But I really appreciate the follow-up conclusion of this reel.
But if you are a left-wing person and you are actively doing an activism, then you are happy again. That statistically you are much happier than the left-wing person who has the same political beliefs as you, thinks the world is just as screwed up in lots of ways, but isn't doing anything.
While yes, recognizing unhappiness may cause unhappiness, by working to do something about the suffering in the world, you may actually make yourself more happy than a similarly blissfully ignorant conservative. While focusing on doom and misery creates inaction and therefore reinforces unhappiness, agency may have the opposite effect. I think it is always important to lift the veil on suffering, even if this means, in the words of Sara Ahmed, you become the cause of the unhappiness you reveal. Because becoming an unhappiness cause also means becoming a possibility cause, creating possibility to solve suffering and create new narratives of happiness. Speaking of suffering, I don't really want to get into this, but while we're talking about happiness and joy, euphoria, if you will, it would feel like an academic failure not to have a section about trans joy. But we're going full theory with it, as usual. So put the memes to one side, set aside your cringe if you can, and buckle in. If unhappiness is contamination for the UK, then you can understand why this aisle is so particularly hateful towards trans women. If to recognize yourself as trans involves recognition of dysphoria and unhappiness with the body, then by seeing trans people existing, you may feel affected by that happiness, or More dangerously, you might question your own happiness, expression, and personal freedoms. Viewing people engaging in so-called gender affirmation is particularly dangerous when you consider the vast majority of people undergoing gender-affirming care are cis people. But of course, the generation of unhappy feeling with bodies is also a motivating factor of a capitalist society. Capitalism cannot sell you happiness solutions unless it can first make you unhappy. If, say, through the media, capitalism can convince you that you should be more thin, then it can also sell you dieting supplements, weight loss courses, and Ozempic. This is also where a significant anti-trans sentiment originates. People criticize trans people of buying into the pharmaceutical industries, where your attempts to create happiness in your body is viewed as a shallow purchase, as actually being capitalistic, playing into the hands of those in power. By this argument, your unhappiness with your body is the problem. If you can become happy with your body without modification, then you don't have to purchase modification. The idea is that the goal is to be a fully self-regulating human whose happiness generates itself and who is able to overcome unhappy objects which are imposed on the body via capitalist-inspired economic motivation. I think there's parts of this argument which is honestly a bit compelling. I mean, I think of skin lightening creams where sales are entirely predicated on the racist idea that light skin is more beautiful. Without that racist idea, this particular bodily modification via purchase would almost certainly not exist. One of my philosophy professors brought up in one of my classes that there is no logical difference between a desire to lighten or darken one's skin than a desire to change one's sex. And that's a very intellectual way to say that we were debating the difference between Rachel Dolezal and Caitlyn Jenner. But you guys, we simply cannot get into that. I love studying philosophy. Anyway, I'm not in this video going to prove to you that trans has some sort of sacredness that makes desires to modify your body in a gender way superior or more moral to other bodily modifications. That argument doesn't interest me at all. What I will say is that private medical transition involving capitalist purchase does so not because capitalism has artificially engineered the desire to transition, but because we live in a capitalist society. And yes, I have a fucking iPhone too. Gotcha, lib. I'm a bad socialist. Any desire to modify the body necessitates purchase unless you live in a country that has a medical diagnosis for gender dysphoria and therefore provides you bodily modification as a medical treatment. Hopefully, you see where I'm going with this. I'm not going to pretend that culture has no effect on the development of body dysmorphia. There is pretty good evidence that growing up only seeing skinny, conventionally attractive white people on your TV may influence your desire to embody skinniness and conventional beauty and whiteness. But all of media of all time is pretty famously negative about trans experience, and also just bodily modification in general. If capitalism generates unhappiness causes, then every single effort of our society suggests that changing your sex is an unhappiness cause. In a world with no TV, where bodily modification did not come with a premium price tag, people would still be changing their sex. If anything, all evidence points to the idea that people would be doing it more. And of course, people would still be detransitioning, and transition would still not make everyone happy. The freedom to have control over one's body has to be a non-linear freedom. It must also include the freedom to change your body and still be unhappy with it. But right now, that unhappiness is weaponized. Trans misery is one of the biggest tools of transphobia. Transphobic individuals often cite detransitioning statistics to scare off the path of transition. Detransitioning documentaries are incredibly popular, showcasing the sad, miserable lives of trans people. Misery and sadness are culturally tied to trans experience, both in terms of media portrayal of trans people, but also in terms of the literal medical diagnosis of trans identity, which involves dysphoria, which could be seen as just another term of unhappiness or misery. It's frustrating because evidence of detransition becomes evidence that trans people are unhappy, ignoring the fact that unhappiness is almost definitely and most obviously produced through the mistreatment of trans people, our discrimination in society, the intense ostracization that comes with being trans, the fact that being trans means that you do not have a good path. Your entire being is a good path deviation. But I think a better frustration lies in the fact that our happiness matters at all. That we must prove that transition makes us happy in order to gain rights and respect. Happiness here is incredibly political. It must be upheld at all cost, desperately clung to, and therefore often incredibly performed. So that leads us to trans joy.
We don't need any more disgusting trans joy. We don't need any more gendered euphoria. Let's just get rid of all of that and spend our time delivering real things that matter to people, like hormones and sex changes and surgeries.
The argument of Jill Peterson, and a sentiment shared by many transsexuals, is that neoliberal focusing on joy or euphoria as a positive deviation from stories of trans struggle and dysphoria create cover for needed transsexual aid. While highlighting trans joy is in and of itself obviously not problematic, trans joy is part of how we form community through shared happy affect, through proximity to each other's happiness. But the argument being made is that it can also direct away from the very real needs that follow from pain, unhappiness, and dysphoria. Where there is unhappiness, there is also motivation for change, evolution, and community support. As we discussed in the last part of this video, uncovering suffering tells you that change is necessary. It creates possibility. If you only possess trans joy, then you don't need to change. You may ask neoliberal society for hormones and surgeries, and they might say, don't worry, you don't need those things. Just take your joy.
Let us seek joy rather than real food and clean air and a saner future on a livable earth, as if happiness alone can protect us from the results of profit madness.
In a blog post by trans meme account Tranby called Your Euphoria is Showing Diva, Why Regurgitating Platitudes Has Repeatedly Failed to Provide Transsexuals with Security in Society, she writes that elevating or denigrating the emotions felt by trans people to be unique, for joy that a lowly T-slur feels to only be trans joy, implies that we are only capable of joy under specific circumstances. I wanted to say the slur, but I got demonetized on my last video essay because I forgot to blur 2 seconds of animated mermaid bush. So I've learned my lesson. In a rebuttal blog post to Tranby's blog post, writer Jane wrote that
trans joy is a problem because joy is a bad weapon. The places trans joy pops up the most are the physical and online centers of organizing for loud trans women. A sympathetic bystander says a pity slogan once. A doll's doll says it every damn day. I'm doing the work and all my allies seem to tell me is to smile more. Tell me to be trans-tenacious, trans-determined, trans-stubborn. If we just try to feel happy faster than they can make us feel sad, we'll all develop drinking problems before they even broke in a sweat.
The dolls are popping off on Substack right now. Like so many women, I hate being told to smile more. I hate this obligation to feel perfectly happy about transition. This pressure to radiate trans joy. I think that's a pressure that a lot of trans people feel. When transsexuals talk about this disdain of trans joy, I think a lot of people read that as discouraging celebrations of trans identity and encouraging a focus on negativity. But for women like Jill Peterson, the critique of trans joy is a critique at a neoliberal trans joy. It's a trans joy that exists in lieu of practical support for transsexuals. It exists because we do live in a capitalist society. And one of the only ways that we've ever managed to get material support for our transitions in this society is by focusing on the suffering of trans experience, by focusing on dysphoria. Focusing on dysphoria has been a largely political move, a survival move. If we can convince the world that we need hormones and surgeries, and if the world we're in pretty much doesn't give a flying fuck about what you want outside of preventing unalignment rates, and often not even then you have no choice but to be like, yeah, I am mentally ill, super mentally ill.
One of the big findings I've taken away from this research is just how much the cost of medical transition has skyrocketed since the 1960s, when transsexual women faced an average cost of $3,500 total for psychiatric evaluation, ancillary care, and surgeries at a gender clinic, which translates to about $35,000 USD today. By the 1990s, that amount had doubled.
I couldn't afford most of my medical transition on my own, so I went to super cheap surgeons, did sex work, and begged for money online. In the end, I spent about £26,000 on my entire transition. And in an ideal world, I probably shouldn't have scrimped so much. And simultaneously, I had to spend tens of thousands of pounds on visa costs as a transsexual immigrant. And for context, as a working class artist for most of my 20s, I've made about half my total transition cost a year. And if you want to help me get off benefits and creep above the poverty line, it would make me so very incredibly happy if you would consider signing up to support me on Patreon. Anyway, as I navigated all of the difficulties of transition, I certainly appreciated the GoFundMe donations of friends and allies more than I did the messages of "You're so valid, diva," and "OMG, you're really radiating trans joy these days, Mars." And I feel that I am more disconnected from euphoria and trans joy than I am from perhaps my wealthy sisters who have supportive family and stable careers. And to be clear, I view transition as the single greatest decision I have ever made. It's just also been really hard. Like really, really hard. As with many life experiences, I have pursued happiness. I've gained expanded possibility and freedom. But I've also had to mourn the many, many losses of possibility and the absolute influx of societal abuse and obstacles which have come from deviating from the good path.
Trans joy is an unfeminist aim and an unfeminist slogan. Wollstonecraft and de Beauvoir and Hooks and Davis were not known in their time for how much women's joy they spread, or for how they could really get a party going. The feelings that women and transsexuals are chasing are not joy and euphoria, they are actualization and autonomy.
Ultimately, I agree with critiques of trans joy as a neoliberal platitude. But going back to what I said earlier, we have to contend with the political nature of trans unhappiness. On the one hand, we have pressure to say, no, look at how happy I am. I promise I'm so happy. How dare you suggest that being trans is an unhappiness cause? And therefore provide evidence that transition is something political and medical institutions should allow and support. But on the other hand, we have to prove our unhappiness to be taken seriously, to say, look, I need hormones and surgeries to be happy. You must take this seriously. So when you see divas getting heated about trans joy online, just bear in mind that we are out here trying to survive. And unfortunately, we have to go with whatever narrative is most likely to ensure our survival. But don't get me wrong, I truly believe that there is power and revolutionary potential in trans joy. And I think that critiquing neoliberal discourses of trans joy should not prevent us from harnessing the immense dissident potential of unapologetic joy from such a hated and discriminated against group. And also, just on a very, very personal note, the way that joy can get you through the hard times, the way that euphoria and celebrations of the self and celebrations of your transition can be the thing that tugs you through some really challenging experiences. Ultimately, I think, in the words of Sara Ahmed, perhaps the most powerful thing of all is to be okay with unhappiness, either as an incorrect political aesthetic others have put on you, or specifically because the world has said that your path is not allowed happiness. And you're saying, okay, well, I'm taking this path anyway, so I guess I'm unhappy now. I guess I'm really fucking sad and miserable. Cool. Bye.
A revolution of unhappiness might require an unhousing. It would require not legitimating more relationships, more houses, even more tables, but delegitimating the world that houses some bodies and not others. The political energy of unhappy queers might depend on not being in-house. To narrate unhappiness can be affirmative. It can gesture toward another world, even if we're not given a vision of the world as it might exist after the walls of misery are brought down.
There is something so powerful about coming out, about finally stepping into the version of yourself that you've always wanted to be. Transition is slow, and I think there is a good year of your transition where you wear that first dress, you feel those first few effects of hormones on your body, and it feels absolutely incredible. And that's beautiful. That's wonderful. Every trans person deserves that, and don't let anybody take that away from you.
The high of your first dress wears off. Actually, being in control of your life is good forever, but it only feels good for a while. Then it feels normal. Likewise, being trans only feels like it's important for a little while, but it's got you forever.
Right now, I am so grateful, and dare I say joyous, to be feeling normal.
And just so you know, Diva, you're a motherfucking Yes, you are, bitch. Yeah, fuck you, you fucking motherfucker oop, oop. Get some fucking women in here, because it's full of men. Yes, God, just sausage party, bro. Work. Anyway, love you. Hope you're having a lovely afternoon. Mwah.
It's not going away. It isn't. It's not going away. I'm afraid we've come to the end of our time. Do you hear me? We've come to the end of our time. The food's run out. We're all going to starve to death. You have to stop taking your joy. Take it from Jack Worthing. It's me. You all have to stop. You all have to stop. Stop. Stop it. But you won't, will you? You won't. I'm afraid we've come to the end of our time. We've come to the end of our time.
I am one of those who God marked on the forehead. Like Cain, I am marked and blemished. If you come to me, Mary, the world will abhor you, will persecute you, will call you unclean. Our love may be faithful even unto death and beyond, yet the world will call it unclean.
These are the words of a character named Stephen in The Well of Loneliness, articulating something that I have felt my entire life. Having been raised in a fundamentalist evangelical church, I was told simultaneously that God had made me exactly the way I was on purpose, and also that who I was fundamentally wrong, immoral, sinful, and evil, and that I would have to spend the entire rest of my life trying to fix, overcome, or at least hide who I was. I was basically told that God had made me sinful, and also that he had made it impossible for me to be happy. I was expected to either find a way to convert myself into a masculine heterosexual man or to choose a life of celibacy and devotion to God. I attended conferences of those who had managed to cure their homosexuality, and simultaneously people who knew that they could not cure their homosexuality but had still chosen to live a life of celibacy. Every option presented to me denied me a conventional happiness path, with the promise that happiness would be granted to me in heaven as a reward for my righteous yet miserable life here on earth. It was a jarring juxtaposition to the Jesus freaks aesthetic of the Pentecostal movement blossoming out of 1960s California. There was this, God really loves you, man. You just gotta ride the wave of God's love. But then also you have to perform gender within the strictest lines imaginable or risk ostracization from your community and eternal damnation in the afterlife. While I was placated with certain epistemic privileges, like not having to worry about why I existed, why I was on the face of the earth, and what happened after death, I was also shamed out of self-expression, not allowed to engage with mainstream media, culture, and community. And the good path laid out for me was like a hike barefoot across thorns, where I also wasn't allowed to eat, drink, or take breaks. And all the while, everyone else was walking on paths made of feathers, adorned with snacks, water, shelter, and rest, while being like, why are you having a hard time? Why isn't this path making you happy? It's making me happy. And yeah, I am fucking bitter about it. The most frustrating part of all was that I did walk the good path. I walked it so fucking good. I was the goodest girl. I didn't have sex before marriage. I was gender normative and presented as heterosexual, or as heterosexual as I fucking could. We did our best. I prayed every day to God. I was extremely active in my faith. I went on multiple missionary trips to convert people to God, and we don't need to get into that. But I was active in faith outreach in my local community. I performed on my church worship band. I confessed my sins to God and to my accountability partner in youth group. He was like, yeah, so I look at images of naked women and that's my biggest sin. And I was like, me too. I was like, so much me too. And then he told my parents that I had a porn addiction, and that's what made me gay. And none of it was true, but who cares? Who cares, Timothy? Anyway, all that to say, church was pretty much my entire life. And outside of church, I got great grades. I graduated early from high school. She was a straight A student. She was doing good. I also was such a horse girl. I was active on my farm. I was mucking manure. I only surrounded myself with other Christians, so all of my friends in my community were fellow believers, and I lived strictly by a biblical code. Religion, according to Nietzsche, offers a conditional, controlled promise of happiness.
Do this and this, refrain from this and you will be happy.
According to a religious perspective, happiness found on the good path can essentially be forced.
Men may and should correct their palate.
Bitch, I fucking tried. I did everything they told me to do to fix my palate, and I was still hungry for As Ahmed writes, not being made happy by what should make you happy can be a source of shame, anxiety, and misery. Why am I not made happy by this? What is wrong with me? As Marx himself said, maybe religion was only ever able to offer me an illusory happiness.
Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the sentiment of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people. The abolition of religion as the illusory happiness of men is a demand for the real happiness. The call to abandon their illusions about their condition is a call to abandon a condition which requires illusions.
So if religion is illusory happiness, where is real happiness? How the fuck do we get it? Maybe we look to utopia. We know that capitalism makes people unhappy, so...
The failure of communism to deliver its promise of an alternative future has been read as evidence of the impossibility of any other future but global capitalism. But that's too easy. There is too much evidence of the failure of global capitalism to deliver its own promise of the good life to the populations of the world for it to become evidence of the impossibility of alternatives.
The problem is, when you bring up alternative futures, when you bring up literally anything that we can do to make the world a better place, you're immediately laughed at. David Graeber states that this is because
faced with anything that remotely resembles creative, non-alienated experience, it tends to look as ridiculous as a deodorant commercial during a time of national disaster.
But the aesthetic silliness or unbelievability of alternative futures does not mean that alternative futures aren't possible. One of the barriers we have towards alternative futures is that bringing them about often involves disruptive, potentially even violent change against a system that will do anything it can to protect itself. We live in a world where
those who fight for alternative futures are seen as committing acts of senseless violence, which stops any hearing of the ways in which revolution makes sense. The revolutionaries expose violence, but the violence that they expose is not recognized as violence. Structural violence is violence that is veiled.
Luigi Mangione is a perfect example of this. Last year, he unalived Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare. Approximately 26,000 Americans die every single year as a result of lack of healthcare coverage. Meanwhile, United Healthcare made $22 billion the year before its CEO, who made $10 million of those dollars, was murdered. United Healthcare has the highest insurance denials rate of any healthcare company, and they are responsible for a huge percentage of Americans' insurance. So even those not part of the 26,000 Americans dying due to being uninsured, even those insured are often dying or suffering badly due to denied insurance claims. This is structural violence, but it is structural violence which is veiled. Suffice to say, there is no happy future in a future which does not exist, in a future which is delayed and deposed. Now, as much as I would love to ramble on and on about my personal ideas of alternative futures and theories I love of potential utopias, I'm realizing that I have a little bit of a habit of ending my videos talking about utopias. If you do want to know more about my ideas on alternative futures and utopias, I recommend you watch my video on the fascism of common sense or my video on abolition democracy, because I go very specifically into utopias and alternative community functionings and government organizing in those videos specifically. And this video is about, well, happiness. In a perhaps vain attempt to find a satisfying conclusion to a video essay on like one of the most nuanced and complex fields of philosophy, I will end with one more quote from The Promise of Happiness.
If we think of happiness as possibility that does not exhaust what is possible, if we lighten the load of happiness, then we can open things up. When happiness is no longer presumed to be a good thing, as what we aim for, or as what we should aim for, then we can witness happiness as a possibility that acquires significance by being a possibility alongside others. We can value happiness for its precariousness, as something that comes and goes, as life does.
I found reading The Promise of Happiness to be so transformative, and I just love the the way that Ahmed writes, the way that she thinks. I think she's so talented, and I think her work is so important. All that to say, I highly recommend that you read more of her work. Whether you feel you have happiness, feel you want it, are pursuing it, are rebelling from it, thank you for watching this video. I wish for you that you will find contentedness in what you pursue, power in unhappiness, and agency in whatever path, deviations, or conformities you walk.
You're going to want to feel this.
When Simon says just take the pill, what doesn't kill you makes you well. Purple, yellow, lilac haze, home again, lost in space. We will do as Simon says. We will do as Simon Simon says what Simon knows. Follow like the river flows. Listen as your mind transcends with no beginning. There's no end. We will do as Simon says. We will do as Simon says. We will do as Simon says. We will do as Simon
A wealthy, white, cisgender woman in a polyamorous throuple of Okay.
You okay? How's this?